So Voss taught, bottom of page 206 and 207, building on just what you read off of, Camden, he says that we need to recognize this idea. And now for our readers, for those who are reading Voss, you're going to see it's going to just jump out at you. But ethical monotheism displays the development of a gradual purification of Israel's religion. Now, what does that presuppose? It presupposes that religion prior to the prophets is under-evolved and ethically compromised, ethically imperfect. And he even says on the top there of page 207, he says that very often the critics will say that prior to the development of this ethical monotheism, there was a sub-eschatological, a sub-ethical component to Jehovah's nature, a sub-ethical conception of Jehovah among the Israelites. And let me give you what I think it is. And Camden, tell me what you think about this. I think more than likely when Voss is talking about the critics saying there's a sub-ethical conception of Jehovah prior to prophetism, what must be clearly in view are those harsh instances of judgment within the theocracy. Under Joshua's campaigns, where God drives the nations out before Israel, and there's what appears to be genocide being enacted, the liberals would look at that and say, look, that's a sub-ethical tribal deity bringing vengeance and expressing hatred against those who are different. And so there, in the pre-monotheistic ethic, is an ethic that would make any Marcion start to smile, an ethic of wrath, an ethic of hatred, an ethic of vitriol that's opposed to humanity. But in the coming of ethical monotheism, there's going to be a kind of relaxing of these parochial tribal instincts where Israel is at war with nations, and there's going to be a kind of developing ethic that idealizes in the direction of love, and a concept of God where he no longer sees he no longer relates in wrath and judgment, but he relates as one who is supremely ethical and who is to be followed by those who are themselves ethical. And the ethical are those who are evolving. If you're reading this as a modernist, the ethical are those who are evolving toward the universal fatherhood of God and the universal brotherhood of man. And so think of it this way. Voss is telling us this, that these critics are reading themselves and their own liberal theology back into the prophets and importing a liberal theological agenda in an alien way onto the prophets.
It's like a cosmic chilling out. It's like,
yes.
We're not going to kill people over idolatry and truth and all these things. I mean, let's chill out, guys. Let's all get along.
Yeah, and now here's the way the rhetoric works. Let's let our listeners get sympathetic. Be a liberal for a second. Be a modernist and think about it. Think about Elijah and Elisha. Now, on critical grounds, up until the coming of these prophets, the Jehovah, and this is a quote from 209, I believe. I should look and make sure here because I've got a little note in front of me, but where on 208 to 209, Jehovah was merely the national God of Israel. Now, what does that mean? Stop and think. It's very easy for us to say, as Vossians, we say, oh, I know what that means. It means that God had condescended and related graciously through redemptive covenant and promises, types, and sacrifices to his people for worship. That's what the national dimension of the theocracy is. So the Lord comes in glory once a year, dwells uniquely, Day of Atonement, that sort of thing. Okay, that's not what critics believe happens. So what is a national concern for a liberal? It is a purely political, parochial, national, ethnic concern. So when a critic says national, he means by that anti-supernatural, sub-ethical, tribal, politically motivated expressions of hatred. That's basically what that kind of national conception of religion spawned. And so it's what is happening here in ethical monotheism is that Israel is naturally evolving beyond a national God with parochial concerns to a universal God with ethical concerns. So the shift is from a vengeful deity who brings judgment upon his enemies to an ethical ideal that all are to aspire toward equally. And surely here, I think, um, Voss is saying, if that's your conception of religion, then on 207 he says, then that means that the course of external events became the great ethicizer in the prophetic mind. And it's there that he uses this logic, and then I'll stop, and I want us to talk, but it's there that when he talks about the great ethicizer, here's what he's saying: that the national God has no other reason of existence than to protect the people, and failing in this, when national security starts to become a little questionable, failing in this, his usefulness is at an
Right.
end.
It's a very pragmatic view.
Camden,
This God, we don't need him anymore. If he can't
isn't
do
that
that for us,
something?
then what's the point?
Yes, and so I mean, if you think naturalistically and you do a socio-cultural and political analysis of the pre-prophetic world of the Bible, what the liberal will tell you, what the critic will tell you, is that the Jehovah rhetoric was a means to a national end. And that means that, according to the liberals, they're recognizing this, all of the rhetoric about Jehovah is actually subservient to a national political end, namely the maintenance of national power. Now, I consider this Voss's way of telling you this is a different
Mm-hmm.
religion. There's no other way to interpret this kind of language. Um, for the critic, God exists for the sake of man, and for the Reformed, man exists for the sake of God. And so, in a context like this, I can't get my mind off of of the utter pragmatism that the liberals are now imposing back onto the religion of Israel in order to make that religion cohere with the logic that the liberals themselves were using during Voss's day. It's an amazing thing, and I think Voss, by speaking this way, is reminding us what Machen taught him, that that to the extent that God exists for the religious purpose of man, if God exists for the sake of man, at any point, true religion is gone.